computer. Yeah, I have to. I need my Dexies of a morning and my coffee because otherwise,
Yeah, I'm on Concerta. Well, I'm on a generic. I also take the Proprion, and it changed my life. I fucking am a massive fan of ADHD medication.
yeah.
Which is another interesting topic, I think, in the holistic space,
Okay, go
because a
on.
lot, yeah, like so much, like fucking, well, everyone's scared of big pharma, or like maybe you won't need it forever, or maybe da da da, or I don't know, just like people's like own like I don't know, like resistance or rejection of it, like sort of gets projected on you. And I'm like, no, like I'm cool.
Fucking yeah. Yeah.
Pretty much every like difficult, like really big struggle of my life, now I can like pin down to just having very low levels of dopamine. And like when
Yes.
I take medication, I function and I'm happier. And
Yes.
that's literally all I really fucking care about is being happy. So
That, that's it. The annoying thing is when you step into this space and they're going, it doesn't exist. And it's like, like I literally know people who go, it doesn't exist. And their partner is like, you look at ADHD in the fucking dictionary and it's a picture of him going like this. Like,
I just think as well that like when you move in like alternative spaces, you also there tends to be like a lot of neurodivergence.
yeah,
And so like I think one of the really common things is this like, oh well, everyone's like that, or everyone's a little bit autistic. And it's like, no, like everyone you're surrounded with, maybe because you're also like a little bit spicy.
yeah,
But actually there's lots and lots of neurotypical people. In fact, like the vast majority of people are actually neurotypical. And that's why the world looks the way that it did, that it does. Do you know what
yeah,
I mean? Like the system that we live in
yeah,
wouldn't exist
yeah,
if everybody was actually a little bit ADHD or a little bit autistic.
yeah, yeah. As like, yes, you do have some of the traits. I get it. You just turn the volume up just a fucking fraction more, and then you kind of get a glimpse of what we go through. And I think,
I saw this really cool video today that was like it was using like the knobs on an oven,
yeah,
like on the top of the oven as like a metaphor for like ADHD and autism, and that we just think of the autistic spectrum or the like autistic cluster, including ADHD, dyspraxia, like
yeah,
dyslexia, blah blah blah, like as like really severe or really like mild, do you know? And like that's it. Whereas this was saying like if each of those like knobs represents like a sensory overwhelm or like social difficulties or XYZ, and it's actually a case of like the knobs are going to be at different numbers for different people. So somebody might be like very able to mask well and present socially or whatever else, but experience really severe like overwhelm in terms of their like sensory difficulties
yeah,
or
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
And it's obviously people that do struggle more socially that get deemed and perceived as being less like high functioning.
yeah,
Um, but the other thing about like low and high functioning is like it's completely based around how other people experience us, not how we experience ourselves or experience our neurodivergency.
yeah,
And like how severe our ADHD or autism is perceived to be is based on like how well we perform and how much of a nuisance we are or we aren't. Do you know? Like rather than it being like how we experience it, because like ADHD has like affected my life so much,
mm,
do you know? But I don't look like what people think autism looks like, and I don't look like and I don't sound like it or whatever.
mm,
Like I definitely spent so much of my life masking.
mm.
And it's still like, medication helps a lot, especially with like ADHD, but like I'm still like I have like autistic burnouts. I have to still like manage it
Yeah,
as like part of how it affects me
yeah,
is still quite severe, do you know?
yeah. Yeah, and they're not very very open to that because they don't experience it. So it's like, well, the book says this, or this is what we hear about it. So like you're the problem, and it's like, well, no, no. Unfortunately, the world wasn't built for people like us, and we're the ones that are trying to fit into this world. And again, it's that conversation of when people try to tell you that it doesn't exist and it's all in your head. It's like, yeah, it is in our head. It's a complete fucking genetic rewiring of our brain that does not unfortunately match how you think. Like it's not something that goes away with, don't it, through breath work and meditation and journaling and having certain practices in there, you can manage it a lot easier. Medication, fucking incredible. Like
it's like that's the difference. It's between like it manages it, but it doesn't necessarily, it manages symptoms. Do you know? And it's like this is a lot of like how we try to treat things in this world is like managing symptoms, whereas like ADHD is actually like quite simple to treat medically because it is a chemical imbalance. And it's like we're actually at a point in history now where it's like it really isn't abstract. Like we can look at brain scans, we can see how the brain functions differently, not only between neurotypicals and neurodivergents, but even within neurodivergence, the different types of ADHD and different neurodivergencies. And we can also see how that brain function changes when medication is utilized, do you know? And I think like there's so many barriers because it sits in this in-between place of being like a medical issue, a physiological thing, or a mental illness. And there's so much stigma around anything that's related to like mental illness. But like I don't know what the difference is between me taking my ADHD medication and somebody taking fucking insulin. Do you know? It's like there's a chemical imbalance in our bodies. Do you know? Like they're just located in different areas of our bodies. Mine is located in my brain. And if we lived in a completely different society, maybe it wouldn't matter so much. But the reality is that this is where I am. You know, like this is like the time frame that I'm in, and whether I'm like treating my ADHD or treating like living in this fucking broken system where I'm consistently and constantly overstimulated and overwhelmed, it doesn't really matter. Actually, like the result, bottom line, is the fucking same. I was struggling a lot more with my health physiologically. Do you know? I also have EDS, so I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome as well, which is very like commonly linked to autism and very commonly linked to ADHD. It's
what is it?
Connective tissue.
Oh, okay,
yeah. And so like it's a progressive disorder, so it's quite common that people start to show symptoms like during adolescence. And I was like perfectly healthy until I was 12, and then like I started getting sick. I've had 3 health crashes and like no diagnosis because they thought that it was autoimmune, and they couldn't, like, you know, they've just run, like I've had so many blood tests that I literally like look like I've done intravenous drugs. Like at this point we can track marks from all of the tests. But it was actually like through getting diagnosed with ADHD that I actually like finally got diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, because they're so commonly linked. And which is really interesting in itself, because for me it raises the question, like obviously there's connective tissue in the brain, like it's a bit of a chicken and egg, like which causes which. But
I think the diagnosis alone relieves so much pressure, because for years you spend so much time going, what the fuck's wrong with me, what's wrong with me, why is this, like when did you get diagnosed?
I got diagnosed when I was 29.
So about the same time.
So I was flagged for it when I was a kid. I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was at school. And I think I was quite dyspraxic, to be honest with you, as well. But that for me, like when I started going to the gym, I feel like I really like grounded it into my body, and it gave me a much better sense of spatial awareness. When I was bodybuilding. But when I did my evaluation for dyslexia, I actually like found it after I was diagnosed with ADHD, and it's all ADHD symptoms. like on my evaluation, and I was flagged for it at the time, and like me and my mom had a conversation about it. I was like 9, so I was like young. We had a conversation about it, and it was like, what does this mean? I'd have to go like obviously get evaluated like by a psychiatrist or by a doctor, and the option was like medication. And at that point, like, I didn't want to go on medication. My mom didn't want me to go on medication whilst my brain was still developing. And it was like, we didn't know what we know now.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
So I never got my diagnosis, and it was something that just was in the background of like, oh yeah, I'm probably a bit ADHD, but I didn't really know what that meant, like outside of like, oh, like I can talk a lot and like I struggle to concentrate, right? And it was like, that was always like at school, it was like consistently like, she's smart, she's able, she like just needs to apply herself more, she just needs to concentrate more, like the very like typical shit.
Yeah.
And when I was 19, I actually started working in special needs education.
Yeah.
And I got put on placement in a school that was a specialist school for children with autism.
Yeah.
And I was about 3 hours into my first day there, and I was like, I'm autistic. Oh, okay. Oh, and at that point again, like we've just come so far. I think especially like since I don't know if I can say the word, the pandemic.
Yeah.
Like since the pandemic, like since lockdown, I think there's been such a massive like shift in terms of awareness, just because there were so many people, so many neurodivergent people that had been just functioning through masking and through adrenaline, that when they went into lockdown, like their nervous system actually regulated for the first time in years. That was you. And then when they had to sort of go back into the world, it was like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore. And like a lot of people, I think a lot of neurodivergent people went into like burnout and recovery. During the pandemic. So it's like, even in the last few years, the whole conversation and like the general awareness of like neurodivergency has shifted so much. It's like crazy to think, even in our lifetime, like sorry, my phone just ran out of storage, so I'm not gonna film anymore. But yeah, like even in our lifetime, just how much things have shifted. And just like when we were at school, like it just was not like, there just was not like any of the information there is today, even in my early 20s. And I think when I went and I was like working in SEN, like in special needs education, it was like, okay, like pretty sure I'm on the spectrum, pretty sure I'm ADHD. I ended up doing a lot of work predominantly with kids that had autism and ADHD, funnily enough. Like I like understood them well and was good at my job. And it just became, particularly in terms of the autism, it was like, well, now I know this about myself, but I can hide it, do you know, like, because it was something, and it actually still is something that, you know, if you have the diagnosis, if it comes up in like job interviews or whatever, like it, you know, it fucks you. And so yeah, I've never even gone for a diagnosis for autism. And actually, like, even my doctor was like, I just like don't massively advise it, because it can still really negatively affect your life in terms of like the prejudices attached to an autism diagnosis, like a 15. And and then I went through like my whole like health crash, which was, I think, very linked to both, actually. so like through my diagnosis and like working with my doctor, who is incredible, Raphael, love him, he's amazing. I've been really lucky in like the support that I've received, but just like through the process, it does seem that I have a type of ADHD, which means that not only are my dopamine and norepinephrine levels low, my serotonin levels are low as well. And the knock-on effect of that then on like my endocrine system, with me also having EDS, which is like a strain on my system anyway. I just like I had a really bad burnout, and I had like hypothyroidism, like my hormones were completely out of whack. I gained like 20 kilos. And it was rough. And when I started to come out, like my recovery from being sick was also very slow, like over years, like sort of like up and down, but like progressively moving up slowly. That I hit like a point where I was really trying to sort of like build up again in terms of work and like create a bit more structure. Like it's crazy to go through being sick for such a prolonged period of time and like not being a functioning adult, you know? So it was like when I went through recovery and when I started to get back on my feet, I also had to go through this process of learning really basic fucking life skills again, you know, just like, okay, like I get up in the morning and I get dressed and like I freaking make food for myself or whatever. Like it's just like very, very basic shit in a more normal way. And I started experiencing ADHD paralysis like chronically. Like really severe. Like I would get up and I'd make myself a coffee and I'd go and sit by my window and drink my coffee, and I'd literally sit like with my coffee in my lap, and I'd be like indecision paralysis of what I'm doing next. And at some point I just zone the fuck out. It was like I would just disassociate and I just sit there in this paralysis, and suddenly I'd like look at the time and like 4 hours have gone past, and I was like, what the fuck is going on? And at that point I'd like the TikTok algorithm had been like calling me out with ADHD content for a while. And I was like, right, I'm gonna go see if my doctor can help me with this. And he was super receptive and super supportive. And my diagnostic, once I actually went to the doctors, my diagnostic process was really quick and like really, which in England is a nightmare through the NHS. He actually gave me a prescription like same day, because he was like, this is really affecting your life, so like we need to make moves. You know, it took a really long time to find the right medication for me and the right like combination as well, because of like all of these add-on complications. And I didn't want to go on SSRIs because of like the low serotonin, so I'm on like bupropion, which like Wellbutrin, which also targets dopamine and neuropinephrine. I can never say that word, but for some reason it seems to elevate serotonin levels as well. And I was not prepared for how much it was going to positively affect me like physiologically in terms of my chronic health issues. And sleep. Like I had like chronic insomnia my entire life. Like since I was an infant, I've never slept normally. I've always had like sleep issues. Sleep's kind of important, turns out.
Funny that.
So it's been
that's fucking
so yeah, 29.
That's wild. I love the fact that we went on that entire tangent. That was beautiful. But it's like it's really
long
good.
Long story long.
long story long. But this is the thing. It's like it's really good to hear someone else's experience during their process of it, because, like you said, I was masking for a very young age. It was lockdown which stopped me and brought me out. Like I was always known as Oz. I was the guy that was always doing things. I was go. You could never stop me. I was doing 20 different things all at once. And as soon as lockdown came in, it was just that's where I stopped. And we were living in a guardianship of about 20 people. And thankfully we had like a bit large backyard in Willesden Green in lockdowns. We actually had people around us, we had places to go, so it was great. But then it was one day, one of the guys we lived with was like, "You do realize you're fucking rude?" I was like, "Huh? What?" And he's like, "You do realize you'll kind of walk in the middle of a conversation, you'll then walk off, you'll come back in, you'll be on your phone, you'll do this, you'll do that. You're just doing all these sorts of things." I was like, "Fuck, you ain't rude." Anyway, it was when my ex started watching a lot of the algorithm with everything popping up with Connor and Kobe. Kobe's actually one of my very good friends. He's going to move here in 2 weeks. So he's moving with us. But it was those boys that fucking brought it all out, and she got.
It's so crazy. It's such a small world because, like, that was like part of basically, like how I got my diagnosis. It's like full circle moment.
But it's beautiful. But my ex had actually said to me at one point, I was like, "I'm going to go get diagnosed as well," because I'm watching her, and I'm just like, okay, I can see a lot of similarities. I'm watching this, I can see this. And her response to me was, don't you fucking get diagnosed. If you get diagnosed, then I've got to keep making excuses for your bullshit. Clearly did not have a supportive ex-wife in anything I did. Anyway, obviously went and got diagnosed. And it was as soon as I got diagnosed, I was like, that makes so much sense. It's just, so many people go really downhill with it. I was just like, well, that's a fucking weight off my shoulders. Now it makes
it was like years of therapy just like conduced. Like it literally, for me, it gave me so much closure. There were so many, like, even just like all of the big like struggles in my life. I remember once saying to my therapist, I was like, I feel like I'm disproportionately traumatized, man. Like, why am I like this? Like I've struggled like with fucking addiction and like gone through sobriety when I was like super young, and then like fucking like codependency and this and that, and like I don't know, just the difficulty of like life. And I'm like, why am I so fragile? Like, why am I so? And it was just like, because I'm neurodivergent. Or like even looking back at situations and like relationships, not just romantic relationship, but like with friends that were always like super bemusing to me, of like, I don't know what happened there. And then I was like, oh, like I get it now. I don't, like, all the way back to school, like I was bullied at school, and that was like super rough for me. And I was always super like like I didn't know what I was doing like wrong, or like why like I was disliked, and it was just like, oh, because I was just very autistic and don't look like what people think autism looks like. So it's like I was also like, just thrown into a box of like who I was or who I should be or how I should act, and like I don't align with the expectation of the little fucking 5-foot blonde. Do you know?
Yeah. But that was the thing. So you have the, like, where we grew up here, like it was always the housing commission kids, the ones that were always the rat bags. They were the ones that was always ADHD. They were the ones that were the fucking troublemakers. Little did you know, I'm also the one sitting up the back fucking drawing and playing on my Game Boy and doing things sitting right fucking next to him, not thinking that I had fucking anything.
I was ruckus. I used to get in fights. I was like very like, I was like very what we associate more with like boy ADHD, do you know?
Yeah.
At school.
Yeah.
And I was like a little bit ruckus. But I was also like confusing because I was also like very polite to the teachers, or very, I just had like, I definitely had like impulse control issues. Like I didn't have, and I was like very quick to like anger. Like when I was younger. So it was like the combination of like high emotions and poor impulse control. I also I experience what I personally like have named like emotional absolutism a lot. So I was just always like, whatever I felt,
Yep.
I felt it so completely
Yep.
that I couldn't remember ever not feeling that way, and I couldn't imagine ever not feeling that way in the future. It's
Right.
like,
Yeah.
so like when things are good, it's like I can't believe that I ever like fucking stressed about anything. Do you know, like, why did I ever like care? Which sounds great, but again leads to impulsivity and just like not being in like touch with consequences.
Yep.
Like
Yep.
all. And then on the flip side, like when things weren't going to plan, it was like everything's hard. It's always been hard. It's always going to be hard.
Yeah.
And like I would just spiral into complete like hopelessness.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
And I think like that's another thing that's particularly like since going on medication, it's like I have this bird's eye view of situations. Like, oh my God, like I can feel what I'm feeling and really genuinely make space for what I'm feeling without it hijacking my entire life. And I think I got to a point of becoming very disassociated because being in touch with my emotions actually derailed my life.
Yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
And so like now it's like I can actually make that space and feel what I'm feeling and go through my process whilst also being able to see the bigger picture of how everything is interconnected. And it's like, it's moments.
Yeah. Yeah. It, yeah.
Like,
So I've actually made myself my own motivational video. And it's like
yeah.
it's me obviously doing the voiceover with some music in the background, but it's for those days where it's like the days where it's fucking low.
Yeah.
It's like cool. I can watch this and I actually see me and see the energy and feel what's coming through. And it's not like I'm listening to something on YouTube where you've got 20 different speakers saying something. You're like, yeah, no, I can do this. It's like it's coming from you, directly from you, and you're having that moment. So that's been a game changer for me because accepting the low days and the high days, like that was the one thing I really struggled for ages to get a hold of. And it's only now like the low days when when I was going through my breakup, the ADHD paralysis was fucking wild. I literally have those days where you'd get up, I'd go for a walk, I'd come back in, I'd sit on the bed, and next you know, I'd find myself lying in bed with the TV on, and it's like you can get out of bed. Next you know, it's 6 p.m. and I've done fucking nothing all day, and the fucking self punishment that would come through that was wild because you still had no idea what was going on. Like I knew about paralysis, like ADHD paralysis, I knew bits and pieces of it, but I was like, surely this isn't it where you're literally out for 12 hours and you're doing fucking nothing. But it's a thing, and people they refuse to acknowledge that that's it, and they look at it as lazy.
Like the guilt and the shame and this is the other thing is like it's so isolating because like there's so much of like your symptoms with ADHD that don't necessarily align with like who you want to be or who you like are a lot of the time. You know, it's like I felt like I was my whole 20s living this double life.
Yeah.
Do you know, of like, and so I was so attached to my persona and my idealized version of self and like this perfectionism. And very like fucking black and white autistic about it as well, and just found it so challenging to be really to experience intimacy because like then people would see the truth, do you know, of the chaos. And that's the other thing is like, you know, even things that's going on medication, like I'm like much neater, I'm much more, you know, just like life in general things.
Yep.
Where it's like it was just so hard to keep on top of things, and that drains you and drains you and drains you. It's huge. And relationships and dating, like breakups, all of these things are so different from when you have fucking ADHD and you're dealing with like rejection sensitive dysphoria and you're dealing with fucking hyperfixation, like whether it be on the person or whether it be on this. And like it really like is so interwoven in how our nervous system functions and that links into like our attachment, and that's what I come back to when I had this session with my therapist where I was like, I feel like I'm disproportionately traumatized. Yeah, babe, you are. Like, people with ADHD, people with autism are disproportionately traumatized because our nervous systems are so much more sensitive. And trauma is a physiological event. It isn't what happened, it isn't the severity of what happened, it's the severity of your body's response, survival response to what happened, which is high, like, jack the fuck up for neurodivergent.
Yeah, you just sparked a memory for me, which I've been trying to figure the fuck out for ages. I need to write this part down.
Do it. That's what I do, baby.
Oh, mate, fucking great. Fucking beautiful. Thank you. I just those moments. This is why I love conversations. Just go completely random. Because, like, one thing I made it when I moved here, because I've stepped away from the stripping, I stepped away from OnlyFans, I stepped away from everything. Is I was given an opportunity here where I could just slow the fuck down. And look, there were a lot of things that were promised that never happened, and the guy actually ended up fucking a lot of us over. But that's a different story. The point is I was able to. I made an admission. I promised to myself to get stuck in conversation with anyone. So if a conversation started happening and it just went on for 2 or 3 hours, then it went on for 2 or 3 hours, because usually there was so much gold that came out from what was happening. And that's where he started seeing, it's like every single person, every conversation we have, even the small, minuscule ones, all have a purpose, and there's always something there. And it's been that. So that's why by the second that popped in, I was just like, thank you. Yeah, fucking. I really appreciate hearing your experience with this, because even though, again, our knobs are different, pun not intended. Even though they're different, it's still along the same sort of lines, because it's still we still share the neurodivergence. Like, we all have there's autistic traits, there's ADHD traits, there's all different traits with it all. And it's nice having someone else that can validate an experience for those who may not completely understand it. Like, I look at my parents are fucking on the spectrum, like fucking wild, but they refuse to accept that it's all passed down. It's all this, but it is what it is.
But this is the thing as well, right? It's like I would say there's like such a lot of neurodivergency in my whole family, you know, like extended family as well. And it's like that's part of like almost part of the barrier to diagnosis, and also part of the trauma, because not only is it like, well, everyone's kind of like this, that story again becomes the barrier. But the thing is that when neurodivergent parents that are undiagnosed and haven't gone through their own journey of acceptance with their neurodivergency, and then mirrored with their fucking neurodivergent child that does all these annoying things that they don't really understand about themselves or accept about themselves, that plays into the experience. And it's like, this is like when we talk about the early development of neurodivergent people and how we have an astronomically like vast disparity in terms of negative feedback compared to neurotypical kids, which really just does like play into like our self-esteem and our self-image and this fucking shame spiraling, you know. And again, the isolation of that, like there's a lot, and there was so much, you know, like obviously like it, particularly in our generation, like ADHD was just that, like you're a bit naughty and you don't concentrate properly. And for me, it's had such a like very massive and often devastating impact in terms of my interpersonal relationships and how I relate to people. And I had no comprehension of that, like whatsoever. Do you know, I had like no comprehension of that. And that's been huge for me. Like, it's been like a huge missing piece in the puzzle in terms of like my personal development, like my emotional healing, and in terms of like my physiological health. Like I've struggled with chronic health issues since I was 12, and a massive amount of my symptoms have been alleviated by ADHD medication. It's like, like there's such a huge missing piece of the puzzle when we're not dealing with ADHD. And that's also passed down. Like, yeah, it's fucking ADHD, neurodivergency is hereditary, and so is that, like, that fucking shame and whatever is like often passed down with it, right?
I think that also stems into like the stopping the generational trauma, especially for a lot of people, because with that, it's that gets passed down. But as soon as we're the ones that are going, actually, no, I'm getting myself diagnosed, I'm actually learning about what this is, I know how much it affected me, fuck having that for my kids, I want to make sure they're all good. We become that barrier in starting to break that generational trauma away from so many things. And when you think about it, especially when you look at our parents and generational trauma, a lot of it's going to come from most likely undiagnosed neurodivergence. Like
my mom has been super open and like, receptive, and she's claims her ADHD like 100%. And I do think that like me going through my diagnosis and like my life afterwards has also been super healing for her, and like her own, like in her own journey, and definitely in our relationship. I think there's been like so many times where we go into like overwhelm, and like we've had like explosive moments in our relationship, whereas now we have this whole different fucking toolkit and language with one another, where it's like we'll look at, like, one of us will look at the other and be like, you're overstimulated. And it's like, yeah, it's like, okay, go decompress, what do you need me to do? And suddenly there's just this like, where we used to come into conflict, we can like show up for one another, like in teamwork with a different understanding.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. That's a beautiful bit of growth. Did you have you heard of the adult ADHD podcast?
no.
Is it adult ADHD podcast? It's by James Brown and someone else. Basically, they were two guys in the UK that during lockdown, it was like adult ADHD UK or whatever it was. Their podcast was one of the other defining moments with Connor and Kobe, that they broke down everything. They went through the diagnosis process. They went through RSD. They go through every bit of thing that we face. And it's really difficult to watch because I know both of the guys personally as well. And you see people at that sort of level that are here educating the rest of us, but then you see how intense their neurodivergence actually is as well, but also the things that they've faced whilst trying to get the information out has been wild. Why people are still trying to silence it. It's like the world would still rather live in naivety and with a fucking veil over their face instead of accepting that this is what it is. It's fucking disgusting.
It is, and it's like, still, I think like in a lot of spaces and in a lot of people's mind, the idea is that you have to like fucking rally through. It's like even when you know about it, it's like it's so that you overcome it. And for me, it's been about integration massively, and actually like part of my part of like another sort of piece towards my diagnosis is that's a model that I work with in terms of my personal development. Like I do self-integration work, whether you like sort of want to look at it like Jungian, but it's probably a little bit more like family constellations. And like for me, it's like I did like an integration of different parts of wounded aspects of myself, and I would just see this part of me that I'm like, I don't know who you are. It's like, what, like, who are you that's like fucking wants to cry because somebody else is using your coffee mug? Do you know what I mean? Like it was like freaking like, dude, I like at that point, like I'm already like fucking a decade nearly deep in my personal development journey. I've done so much therapy. Like my mom, I grew up in the personal development. Wow, I like grew up in a hippie community. I'm not, it was like I have like the tools to deal with real difficult like conversations or whatever in my interpersonal relationships, and I want to cry over my, like, I literally, like, I want to scream because somebody's using my coffee mug. Like, who are you? Who are you?
I mean, oh yeah, I actually had over this little mug yesterday. Fucking, I was walking around the house going, "Fuck my coffee mug! Don't tell me you took it to work."
Send me
Don't.
over the edge.
Yeah, literally. And then I came down here and it was sitting down here on my desk, and I was like, "Well, it's a good thing I took a couple of breaths beforehand."
My best friend was staying at my house before I came to Mexico. My best friend came to visit me in Spain. She walked into my room like with a coffee, like with my coffee mug. And like I was still asleep. I saw that mug. I like, my eyes like pinged open. I was like, is that for me? And she was like, no, but I'll bring you one if you want. And I was like, yes, in that mug, and you can use a different one. Thank you very much. Like, no, I can't. I can't.
Look, I feel you because I need the big mug. I need the big.
I just get attached to certain inanimate objects, but it was like that kind of awareness of like, okay, this obviously is like irrational. Do you know, like this is obviously I'm having an extreme response
Yeah.
to certain stimuli. And it was like, I think at first it's like you think of it more as like an inner child thing, where it's like, but it was like, no, like you're not, this is something else. And then post-diagnosis, that it was also an integration of like all of these like rejected aspects of ADHD aspects, autistic aspects that like had been confined to the shadows and like rejected and shamed and discarded. And so it was a huge like process of reintegration, and through that and the combination of that and medication, like I'm the most high functioning I've ever been, and like the happiest, do you know? And it's not through overcoming my ADHD, it's been massively through embracing my ADHD. Yes, taking medication, yes, having like treatment, yes, like working on it, and like yeah, like my treatment of it, but also, like I'm like a million tabs open, and I'm jumping between like different projects and different client things, and like integrating the things that work for me that actually make me more productive.
Yeah.
And go against everything that I was told I had to do, you know?
That's the pure thing. That's the best example of like self-acceptance and self-love as well. When you're accepting and you're in full ownership of exactly where you are, you're not trying to change. You've got things to help manage, but you're then in complete control. That's where everything actually starts to subside as well, because you've got that accountability. You're not fighting against what it is.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, too many people, they try to fight against what their ADHD is. They try to fight against whatever they can perceive to be wrong with them. They'll fight against it. And it's like, well, no, I'm not that person. And unfortunately, that creates so much more of a barrier and reduces a lot of what their growth is. With saying that, what's your definition of self-love?
Oh. Well, for me, I think like fundamentally a massive part of my self-love journey has been in self-acceptance. Do you know? I think that's, the idea of just the simple acts, or I don't know, like having a bath, or like taking care of yourself, or whatever. Like these are the gestures. It isn't like the real like shabam of it. Like, can you make space for yourself and sit with yourself in your own discomfort, and also like in the moments where you're not living up to like your ideal? It's like that's when I need my love the most. And of course, with ownership, like with the empowered ownership of showing up for yourself with accountability, but also with understanding. I think that again, like shame is something that's so deeply isolating and useless a lot of the time. do you know? And we can strive to do better, but I think adopting a habit of observing myself with curiosity rather than leaning so harshly into like judgment has served me a lot more in terms of my self-love, but also in actually becoming better, you know, because you're not in denial. Stepping away from perfectionism is like massive. But yeah, I would say that for me, it's that my self-integration practice is an act of self-love, for sure.
Yeah. I heard have you heard of the Change Mind podcast? Okay, so this oh really?
Like, well, I know, like I love podcasting because like I love talking shit.
Yeah. Yeah.
But like I actually listen to like true crime podcasts and like
wait, do you know Small Town Murder?
I listen to Morbid like religiously. It's like pretty much like the one podcast that I listen to all the time, especially their like listener tales are my favorites. And yeah, I listen to Morbid.
It sounds good.
Yeah,
Sounds
it's
morbid.
great. It's like true crime and then like spooky. Spooky.
See, I'm all for spooky. I think you might like there's a podcast called Small Town Murder, where basically it's two comedians and they find a murder and they make fun of the murder. They don't make fun of the victim, but it's the stupidity of the shit that goes on around it. And my God, there are just some thick people out there, some horrific crimes, but they do the whole lead up to what it is. And my God, some people are just stupid, but it's fucking hilarious. So if it's true crime, you might enjoy it.
Yeah, I do. I sometimes I listen to like podcasts, but I think like more like educational podcasts.
Yeah.
But and like I do listen to books a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of books. But yeah, I think a lot of the time when I go for like entertainment, whether it's like podcasts or whether it's like TV, it's like in those switch off moments, and I kind of gravitate towards entertainment rather than education.
You need to though. Like, but entertainment is like in the morning when I'm going for a walk, if I'm in the car, it's a podcast, educational. When it comes to the afternoon and I've switched off for the day, I've got liquid drum and bass on, or I've got something just to fucking chill to. It's great. But like this morning's podcast, he was talking about this 12-step program they go through with like AA and recovery.
Yeah.
And they were talking about you have people where they get like their month chip, they get the year chip, the 10-year chip, whatever chip they're getting, but they've also got a white chip for the people that have just relapsed and have had to start again. And it's like what they do, the way they reframe it all is you're committing 110% to what you're doing, the changes you're making, being sober, all this sort of stuff. But if you do have a slip up, you're 100% okay with it. You're 100% okay with it, because that way you're then able to get back on the horse. If you start punishing yourself, that's where it starts to spiral and you go back down and you start spinning. And I think that's the beautiful thing of what we're trying to teach people, that it's okay to have these sorts of moments of spinning down. There was a reason I got onto that. I completely forgot what it was.
Well, I think you're probably linked to like me saying that for me, self-love, that's what self-love is about, meeting yourself with like understanding, right? And like I think of it somewhere in there, I'm also like a very logical, like strategic thinker, and it's like it's my programming, right? It's like my default programming that like both like on a biological genetic level I've come in with, and then through my early development that is there. And for me, like among other things within like that code is like codependency. I can dance that dance with anyone on my own in the mirror if need be. You know, like it's like that code is there, it's always an option. But the more that you do bring it into awareness and like with understanding and with compassion, the more you can choose something different. And it isn't like you're not just constantly functioning through that default setting. And then the more that you practice something different, the more it actually like overlays the default.
Yeah.
Doesn't like wipe it out. It's still an option. Do you know? It's like it's really like fucking deeply ingrained.
Yeah.
But it's not what you reach to. And that also happens at a physiological level. And again, this is like the thing that's somewhat frustrating for me is when we try to separate our body from our mind, from our emotions. You can't. They are all happening simultaneously. They're all informing one another. Like if you have a pattern of behavior that you have learned because of the dynamics in your life, in your early development at the emotional level, that has constructed the way that your brain works, the way that your brain is shaped. Yeah. When you learn new behavior and you practice it again and again, your neuro pathways change. Like the way that your brain functions changes at a physiological level. Do you know? So I think it's like that a really big thing for me in the work that, because I do personal development coaching as well as Soul Entrepreneur Collective, and like a really big thing for me in that with clients is it's not in the awareness that healing happens.
Yep.
And it's why you see particularly people with ADHD and like neurodivergent people are often incredibly self-aware, because we, in terms of like, we have like psychoanalyzed ourselves since very early on, because at some level we know that we're different, and it actually is part of our survival mechanism is to become very interested in psychology and how people work, and also being able to understand other people to protect ourselves. Do you know? But you'll see a lot of people, particularly neurodivergent, but in general, that have, they've got the timeline mapped out. They know what happened when they were 7 and their, mum did this or their dad did that, or this thing happened at school. You know the events and you know the timeline, you know why you are the way you are. And then what?
Yeah.
Do you know? Because it's like, it doesn't actually solve anything. It's an important factor of like then knowing where to go from there. But I think that the actual healing occurs when you show yourself a different outcome.
Yeah.
And you start to actually experience the different outcome rather than the fucking loop.
Yeah.
Again and again, and you get to see yourself show up differently, and you get to like increase your self-trust, and with increased self-trust comes increased risk resilience, increased vulnerability resilience. Do you know? And you can really start to experience it through your physical body, through your nervous system, expanding your nervous system's capacity, and then it changes the wiring in your brain, and that's the healing.
I had this conversation yesterday. Literally. Because one of my mates was talking about obviously relationships with ADHD, certain things of how you would go, like, neurotypical neurodivergent relationship. What's the best way to make sure it kind of flows a bit better? And he was obviously his partner isn't fully aware of what ADHD is, even though she's clearly got it. She is still in that state of non-awareness for it. And then she looks at things that he does, and there are those things where it's just him doing his thing, but then she's getting upset about it and all that sort of stuff. Anyway, what I said to him was exactly that. The moment change can start occurring is when you catch yourself in that moment about to continue that habit that you about to, or that you want to break. If you can catch yourself in that moment of about to continue that habit, even though you've already had that thought going, probably shouldn't do that, that catching yourself that moment there and using something like the 5-second rule and changing your state, doing something completely different, is where the change begins. You're probably going to have moments where you go back on yourself. It's okay. But that's that moment is when you can start catching yourself there more regularly.
And I think like something that's been coming up a lot for me, like recently with me and my like endless different streams of random things I do. I read runes as well. And I just like had a lot of rune readings this week, which is quite unusual for me.
What do you mean?
Sorry?
What do you mean room reading?
So runes are like
Oh,
an
runes.
oracle.
Ah, I thought you said
Yeah.
I thought you said rooms. I'm like, what? You walk into a room and you pick up the
That's the
energy.
second time that's happened to me today. Like
Runes.
hypothetically,
Like,
runes,
it's
like
like
Norse, exactly like
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Exactly like that.
yeah.
So yeah, so I've had a lot of readings this week, and something that's like, oh my god, my friend Danny will not take no for an answer. I literally told her I was doing a podcast tonight as well, and she just keeps texting me and keeps calling me.
Yeah, I love it.
um yeah, so I've had like quite a lot of rune readings, and something that I feel like has been like a theme in that this week is this thing of like people stumbling onto the trigger, right? Going to the point where there's that nervous system response where it gets like really fucking raw, do you know? And you feel like that you're like fully fucking exposed, do you know? Because there isn't the like risk resilience or vulnerability resilience built there. There isn't the self-trust that you're going to keep yourself safe in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so often then there is like the withdrawal and the pulling back into your cave, do you know, like, and going into like, and I think of like the rune Perthor among many other things. It's such a like complex rune, but in certain situations I think of it as like a cave, and it's like it's got a wall and an opening.
Yeah,
And people go in the cave and they look at the wall and they're like, how the fuck am I going to get out? And the door's open behind you. Do you know? And
interesting.
it's like through that courage of those moments when those triggers come up, being able to bring awareness in that moment and like be in your body and breathe into it, and then say the thing, take the leap, do it's like, you know, set the boundary,
Yeah.
do the whatever, and show up for yourself. And with that, another beautiful thing that's come up a lot in readings this week is how incredibly good it feels when we show up for ourselves in authenticity, when we honor ourselves, when we don't abandon or betray ourselves, even when we don't get the response that we wanted from that other person, even when it blows up, it still feels better than when we like leave ourselves aside, even if we do get the response that we want from the other person.
Yep. Yep. Oh, that's basically closing the self-esteem gap, isn't it? Because you have what you say you're going to do, your self-esteem, the further it gets apart. And it's unfortunately, it's very easy for people to take the easy road and go for the thing to push it away and not make the change and then complain about it, going, why aren't I changing? Oh, that's an issue, mate. You need to fucking sort that out. No one can make you change. No one can help you do that but you. It's not like fucking you're going to be, they're going to have someone there with them the entire time watching him going, let's stop, take a breath. It's down to you to be able to do that.
And I do think that it takes so much courage. Do you know, it takes so much bravery and courage. And I look at like, even like, you know, within my own journey, there's been phases and periods where it's like, I know that I am this way, but I don't know how to do it differently. And I'm still somehow finding myself on the fucking merry-go-round, like going around the same fucking loop again and again. And then there's been phases where it's like, okay, like I really can't do this anymore, but I also don't know what's next. Like I don't know how to do it differently either. And like there've been places in my life where I've completely like withdrawn into that cave, and like you have to build up the courage to go out and be fucking, there is a safety in doing what you've always fucking done, even if it sucks.
Yeah.
At least I know what to do here.
Yep.
I know how to function in this shit show, even if I don't fucking like it. And then obviously there's a safety in doing fucking nothing, and I just like close myself away in the fortress. Like it's pretty easy to be like well regulated and emotionally healthy when you like put yourself away in a little fortress, disconnected from the world and like meaningful relationships and intimacy and vulnerability. Like we can all be a fucking
Yeah.
Like, you know, like
Yeah.
if you think you're on the path of enlightenment, go spend some time with your family. Like,
Oh,
you know,
yes.
like go and like humble yourself for 2 minutes in like the confines of intimate relationships,
Yeah.
especially with the people that push your buttons the most, because they're the ones that fucking put them there.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
Like
yeah.
we are very social beings. And
Mm,
I think that our lack of willingness or courage or ability or capacity or skill
mm,
to like weather true, deep, meaningful connection and intimacy is detrimental to us as a race. I think it's like, you know, as a human race, it's
mm.
we're doing so much damage to ourselves.
Mm. Yeah. 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 It's a reality of it, isn't it?
Yeah.
But,
Can I pause for one moment?
go.
I want to order food.
Amazing. Yes.
I want food.
Order food.
I just feel like we could chin wag
For,
forever.
yeah,
So
for a very long
I
time.
just want to make sure that I order some food before everything shuts, because I'll be
Well, you need to definitely do that. Actually, I'm gonna go to the bathroom while you order food.
yeah.
I should actually probably pause this.
I was like,
Yeah, that's boring.
I know.
Boring. Plus, it was some of the places. It was a big black building, which is like one of a restaurant, a big black building where they made like the best breakfast burrito. I used to go there every morning. I can't even remember what the place was.
Like the Asian bodega.
Potentially, there was also one right next to the jungle gym, like right next to it. They made a really
Yeah, it's like quite. That's why I was thinking of Asian bodega. It's quite close there, and it's.
yeah, it's fucking beautiful. But let's actually get on to some of the questions.
What then? What then?
Well,
Ask
okay.
me some.
So, what actually inspired you to jump into the position that you're in now to help your fuck? How do you pronounce?
That's a branding issue. Soul Entrepreneur Collective. Um, well, Soul Entrepreneur Collective was a lot. A lot. For me, the very beginning, like birthplace of it actually happened when I was at school. I was like
Yeah.
super young. And everyone was one of our teachers had gone around the room. I asked us what we wanted to do when we grew up. We went around the room, and I was, I don't know, probably like 12. Again, contextually 12 and neurodivergent. We like, yeah, they were going around the room, and everyone was like, you know, whatever, like want to be a lawyer or a policeman or whatever it was. And I was like, I don't know what I want to do, but I want to change the world for sure. And it went very awkwardly quiet. And I kind of like scrabbled, and I was like, but I don't mean like in a big way, like I don't feel like I need to be famous or that I need to like be meaningful in a historic way. I just think that when you find something to do that positively impacts a person, that then through that positive impact, they go out and positively impact other people, and then your ripples grow.
Yep.
Like, and that was it. Like, that's what I knew. Like when I was a kid, it was like, I want growing ripples. Whatever I do, I
Yep.
want it to lead to my ripples growing.
Yeah.
And then I ended up working in marketing after I like blew up on social media. I used to be a fitness influencer, and I was a fitness coach and bodybuilder, and I had grown this like really, really massive following on social media, but I wasn't getting the conversion rates that I wanted to be getting in terms of sales. And I was like, I just don't really know anything about marketing or branding a business. So I'm going to go learn about that. And neurodivergent, I learn best on my feet. And I just started placing myself in environments where I was around people in marketing and going to events and like networks, and that's always just been how everything's come to me, to be honest with you. It's just like through connecting with people. And I got invited to consult for this tech company in terms of their social media. And I did. I went and did like the consultation. They offered me like a job leading up their marketing, like social media marketing. And so I took it. And did that for a bit, and I learned a lot, and like it, you know, it was an amazing experience. I was treated really, really well by the company. And part of the reason I left as well because I was like, wow, I'm like really living somebody's fucking dream in like a company with a lot of perks, and I'm not really actually enjoying myself, although I learned a lot. So I left, and I was like, I need to learn more about marketing, like very much in terms of like for sole traders, for coaches, for, you know, like wellness professionals. And that took me down the route of these kind of like social media marketing fucking, you know, coaches as we know them, as it's still like sort of booming, and like these courses. And I worked on one of those programs, and it was horrendous. And I came away from that whole being in that space and in that world and seeing these programs and seeing people's experiences and how much, you know, people were paying tens of thousands to do courses and making fucking nothing, do you know, like coming out of it with nothing. And then, you know, the strategies of like fucking gaslighting and manipulation and just like upselling and like blaming, like, you know, it's not working because you're not doing this or X. It just fucks me, man. Honestly, I came away from it all like so broken spirited. And at this time I was also already going through my health crash, so it was just like everything felt mad hard anyway. And I was like, I think internalized this like belief that in order to be successful, I was gonna have to compromise on like my ethics, my integrity, and my morals, and I couldn't. So I just like completely like pulled back from social media. Like I kind of disappeared. Like I stopped like doing fitness. I stopped doing coaching. I stopped like for years. It was like I just like came out of the scene. Like and like I say, at the time I was really sick, so I was kind of like focusing on my recovery anyway. But it was really hard to like shift out of that and know how to like create a belief. And then I you know, as I started getting better and getting stronger, I was like, I'd like physically, I was like, dude, you can figure this out. You're hella smart. Like, you can figure this out. There has to be, there's definitely people that are successful that aren't fucking monsters. Do you know? Like, you can do this. And that's what it was born from. And it's still, you know, it's still very like early stages. I've started doing like the market research for it and started doing work, you know, freelance work to sort of market research like nearly 4 years ago. So it's been like, again, like a slow build to really like figure out what's missing and what I'm offering. And absolutely my goal with it is to create something that's going to streamline the process for people, whether it's launching a business or launching a product or relaunching in the wellness space, in the holistic wellness space, that isn't going to actually cost them a fucking bomb, lead to them having actually more work rather than less, and therefore like getting people that do have genuine like skills and talents and medicine to share with the world that literally just aren't, because they don't know how, or they think that the only way that they can is to spend 10 grand on a fucking shit program or scam other people. There is like other ways of doing it, and that's what I do. And I sort of like take people through depending again like where they're at in their business. So if it's somebody that's starting from scratch, like a real like establishing of what it is that they're doing, like their branding and their offers and how they're gonna, how they're gonna sell, and then taking them through like the marketing process, and then on to within that marketing process, like content creation, and actually like streamlining that process, like setting up automations, and then moving more into like advertising and PR, and like paid ads. And within that as well, I also do quite a lot of like creative direction and like strategy. So I'm a big fan of multiple income streams and creating passive income streams, and seeing also how you can actually earn money from your marketing.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful because I agree with you. Having so many people are scamming everyone, telling you to charge more and more and more and more, and their marketing is great, but what they offer is absolute shit. And unfortunately,
so the long term, like I say, it's like just me at the moment, but like the long term goal for Soul Entrepreneur Collective is for it to be an agency and for it to actually offer, everything done for you. And at the moment that's like outsourced, but at some point I would like to have like all my copywriters and web developers and everything, so that the same thing that these like fundamentally is all just in one place, and it's actually fucking set up and functioning.
This is what's stopping me at the moment. I've got so many people messaging me going, "Oh yeah, I want to help you grow your business. I want to help you do this. Your following's growing. I want to help you do this and this and this." And like, cool, I've got one guy who came on a trial basis for a month at 20% of whatever I earn. And I'm just like, I'm looking at the stuff he's sending me, and I'm like, cool, I agree with this, I agree with this, I agree with this. But let's not move away from my pillars. Let's not do things that don't align with what I'm trying to do. I've got people trying to get me on hydrogen water. I've got people trying to give me essential oils. I've got people trying to throw stuff at me to fucking market and do all this sort of stuff. And I'm like, no, you go away, because I'm not going to become that person who comes into this space where everyone starts going, I really love what you're doing. You've got such a strong message. To then me going, by the way, have these essential oils. Oh, you try to start having hydrogen water. Also, don't eat this because this has sugar in it. Also, the government's doing this to you, so don't do. No, it's a shit space where people try. They see you doing something, they try to leech.
It's just also like it's. I feel like there's so much bypassing that goes into it, where it's like. And look, like we all have to face the reality that we're like trying to move in like a conscious way within a very flawed and like morally void system. It's like we have to make it work within capitalism that has so many poor ethics, and so there's a level of like bypassing that goes into anything, like putting anything like conscious and like. Sorry, that's my fridge. Does this growling at me every so often.
Your fridge is
I don't know why it does that, but yeah, like we all have to find like this compromise to some degree, I think, and I think it sets people back a lot, like because they associate that compromise to making money in the first place, and it's making money is great. I fucking love making money. It's fantastic. I love spending money, but there is definitely a line where people bypass into shit that's definitely unethical, and like there's so many pyramid schemes and fucking
it's
just not nonsense.
And
it's like generalized, and that's it. At the end of the day, like if you're doing something, it's called Soul Entrepreneur Collective because it's like these are like businesses that are like your soul's calling. It's like your purpose. That's what you're wanting to put out into the world, and then what you're gonna like water that fucking message down through trying to like do the same shit that everybody else is doing. And people aren't dumb, like really, like people know when you're not being real, people know when you're being phony, and like you give people the ick. And I think it's really sad when I can see certain people that like I watch them like start out on their social media and they're cool as fuck, and I can tell when they've started working with a business coach, and I'm like, you're fucking boring now. Like these like fucking the like structured like captions, templates with your little rocket emoji, and it's like, we're not in like the early days of like social media anymore. We're not in the early days of social media marketing anymore. Gen Z are onto your shit. Like, it's not boomers that don't have a clue. It's not millennials that think it's cool with you. Gen Z know you're phony, and you're just going to become more and more obsolete. Like, it's just literally, it's time to like rekindle. It's called social media for a reason. It's about cultivating connection, and you don't cultivate connection by just emulating what every other person is doing in the same like boring, formatted, limited like way of doing it, you know. If you want to be an influencer, it's different, you know. If you want to do, if it's like, it really, it depends what you're doing, but it's like for service providers, you want to help people with their personal development, be personable. Fuck. Like, like, you know, why is somebody going to entrust in you to hold this like very, very sacred and intimate space from them, and you don't even have the courage to like show yourself?
That's it. People. Like, the more authentic you are, and you show exactly who you are and why people should come to you instead of being that mold, then it will work. But it's again, it's just living to your authentic self.
It's been a tough thing for me in business because like my offers are very, very like client led, and it's really important for me to like maintain that. Although I do have like a framework that I work with and like a timeline that we're working through, it also really does depend on each individual person. It's really important for me to maintain that, both in terms of, you know, catering to them specifically as who they are and having them represented through their branding, catering to their specific needs, like obviously being neurodivergent, often attracting neurodivergent clients, and like integrating that and working with it, and also working with people's time frame and budgets, because a lot of the time, especially with like the startups, you know, they might be working and not have like, definitely don't have fucking 10 grand to spend, you know. And I have like clients that are bigger companies and they have more disposable budget to put into things, and you know, blessed be, because also allows me to keep the flexibility with like the regular people, you know, the one-to-ones that are like starting out on something. And like, I want to like maintain that as much as possible, where there is like a level of, rather than it's like this and this for this, it's like, what do you have, and let's figure it out, and like make it, just making it accessible, doable, and like personalized.
We're not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and that's where shit goes wrong. That's where shit goes wrong.
And like, for me, honestly, like for me personally, I feel like my calling and like my personal mission is in my personal development coaching, and like for like Soul Entrepreneur Collective is something that is it's like a like for the collective, do you know, and it's like, and I believe, I genuinely, like at the core of it, believe that with it is helping these people that have a fire in their belly for a reason. Do you know, like you've got something to share with the world, like you've got this purpose. There's people out there that already are like looking for you and looking for your medicine and like need what you're going to teach, and like the only reason that's not happening is because you don't know how to like set up some systems, right, and like expand. And like I get a lot of satisfaction like on on a cognitive level, like I love systems, I love algorithms, I love like fucking like connecting the dots, that shit, like it fires me on. So the sort of strategy aspect, and then like overseeing and project managing things is like super fun to me. And so is like the coaching, and I do incorporate in to the work that I do incorporate a level of personal development coaching when blockages come up that are emotional. I think there's such a massive connection between our attachment styles and our relationship with money and our relationship with business. And so I do quite a lot of work on that as well. And yeah, that's where it's like more holistic, you know, and ultimately centered in authenticity and integrity. And I have to believe that like we're moving towards a world where there is more honest business.
Yeah, well, that's a hope. That's a hope, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's my little pebble.
I
to grow them ripples.
I think what we're gonna have to do is you get some food, and I think we may have to do another thing because we could literally talk for fucking hours.
Yeah.
So let's make sure we do another one, and I'll try to ask the questions next time. But it is what it is. But I'll
No, I'm chill. Like if you've got to run, go for it. But
yeah. I'm gonna. We got some of the boys have just turned up, and we got to film some content. So
we can set up
again,
another one.
let's definitely do it again. I want to get as much before I go away. So
yeah, well, like I'm usually pretty flexible, especially like I don't usually work this late, so in the evenings I'm pretty free. But yeah, like we can do another one whenever's good for you.
I'm gonna try to book in a few extras so I can got stuff to just post whilst I'm away. So I'll look at it all, I'll let you know. But thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, no worries.
That was fun. I'm gonna stop this.